But like you said, unless we could get to that point, it's not really going to be fathomable.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I kind of wanted to bounce an idea off you guys. So in my notes here, I was kind of looking over everything that I took notes of, and I actually went and did some research on what agriculture on Mars actually looks like right now. What they believe, what the current scientists believe would be kind of the best way to make farming happen if it could happen. And basically, they're Hello and welcome to Talk Ag to Me, the podcast dedicated to improving ag literacy around the globe. I'm your host, Brayden Black, and in today's episode, we're actually be taking a bit of a different direction than usual. We're actually be talking about a movie that has to do with agriculture. And to help us with this episode, we have two special guests here. We have Logan and Brayden, and they're going to introduce themselves real quick.
Go ahead, Logan. You go first.
All right. Yeah, I'm always second to Brayden anyway, so I guess I'll go first. Yeah, no, my name is Logan. I guess I'll give last name because it's told every podcast. It's last name Poindexter. I'm from Texas. We do a little podcast talking about movies behind the scenes. A lot of time, just kind of crazy stuff that happens, some funny stuff generally. We try to keep it pretty light. But yeah, I'm 21 and I guess that's all there is to say. Brayden?
And you're a nerd. You forgot that part.
True.
Let's right in.
Yeah, my name's Brayden. I'm the co-host with Logan on our podcast, Absolutely Gobsmacked. We started a little over a month ago, about a month and a half maybe, and it's been really well. It's been doing really good. We've been seeing an increase in viewership. Kind of blew up a little bit on Reddit for an episode or two. So we're growing, definitely. And, we enjoy what we do. We talk about movies and what happens behind the scenes, as Logan mentioned. I'm in South Texas. I'm way down by the Mexican border, about 5 minutes away. And Logan, I know he's more on the coast. He's a couple hours away from me. But yeah, we do our podcast remote, and yeah, we enjoy doing it. I think if you guys want to give us a listen, it's more light. We add some comedy to it. Once in a while, we do go into some true crime. Maybe my idea is once every 5 episodes, we go into true crime, but it has to related to Hollywood, right? Behind the scenes history still. So that one's a little more serious, but for the most part, it is a comedy series. So yeah, you have any questions for us?
Well, I actually have a lot of questions, but we'll get to that a little bit later on. But yeah, no, awesome. I like, Brayden mentioned I found these guys on Reddit actually, and I kind of engaged with them, and I've been listening to the podcast ever since, and I enjoy it quite a bit. It's a nice brain break. It's very just kind of fun just to listen to, like, oh, I didn't know that happened kind of thing. And there's a surprising amount of talk about munchkins, which I'm still kind of curious about.
Yeah,
but yeah, so I think that it's worth the listen. It's worth checking out, and we'll remind you guys towards the end about that kind of thing too. But I think as far as personal questions, I don't have a whole lot right now. I actually do have one. What, if any, experience do you guys have with the agricultural industry or growing food?
Brayden, I'll let you go first.
Not very much. We do have some farmland here areas, so we'll see the occasional livestock. We'll go to they have a livestock show here, so we'll go and attend that. That's fun. Little mini rodeo. And I when I was younger, I lived in San Antonio for a little bit, and so just Texas is a big country area, right? Lots of farmland, lots of flat land here where I'm at, especially right by the ocean. There's not really, nobody here has basements because we're so close to the ocean, so literally just flat straight across. And so yeah, I don't have a ton of experience. I do consider myself more of a city boy, but I think I have more experience than the typical city person. So I eat vegetables that are grown from the ground. Let's see. We got Texas A&M here. Those are Aggies.
Oh yeah,
nearby. Well, a few hours away, but yeah. So other than that, there's not much else.
cool. Logan?
Yeah, and as far as with me, actually, among our friend group, I'm always like teased as the farmer Logan or
Yeah.
and stuff like that. They're like, you need to go back on your on your tractor and stuff like that. Always teased, but no. Whenever I was, I believe I was 9 when we moved out of West Texas. We had lived on a 8,000 acre lease ranch.
Hmm.
Which sounds, really big. Like we would have tons of cattle, but we only had about 300 head because West Texas is a desert and there's not much grass there. But um, from there, my parents both really enjoy gardening and stuff. And in fact, in my backyard, I have some corn and well, I'll be planting potatoes whenever the fall comes in, as I do every year. So, I mean, a little bit. I'm by no means an expert, but I do like having my hands in the dirt, so to speak.
Awesome. Well, speaking of potatoes, that transitions perfectly into our topic today. But yeah, no. Before we get into that, I think that it's cool that you guys both have at least. I mean, Logan seems to have quite a bit more, but at least a firm grasp on the idea of agriculture and everything that goes into it. And I was raised in an agricultural community here in California. I actually raised some of the animals that are used in some of those livestock shows, like Brayden had mentioned, and I definitely understand the get back on your tractor kind of banter that goes on, because the school I went to, most of the kids were more city-esque, even though we lived in a country town, and they were not Aggies, and so if they heard me talking about ag, they told me to go back and play with my cows, and usually I did because I like playing with my cows. But
cows are cool, man.
Cows are cool. I will stand by that until the day that I die.
Yeah.
Awesome.
The best milk.
They sure do. And I couldn't live without a cheeseburger.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think that's a pretty good transition into our topic today. So, like I mentioned at the beginning of the episode, this is going to be somewhat of a different style, but that's kind of been the whole point of this second season that I've been calling it of the podcast, is that we're trying some different things, doing some different approaches to some episodes and seeing what works and what doesn't. And so with this one, we're actually be talking about a movie that more or less talks about and kind of goes into the science of agriculture. And that movie is The Martian. Mm-hmm. So as we explore that more, what first of all, I'm assuming you two have seen The Martian.
Yes, I'm assuming I have.
Yes.
So, what are your thoughts? What just of the movie as a whole? What do you guys think?
Yeah, well, if you don't mind, I'd like to chime in here. First of all, I saw this movie when it came out in the theaters. Had been looking forward to it just because it stars Matt Damon, who I think is a good actor. I mean, he's not, he doesn't go way out there with his roles a lot of the times, but I think he does a really good job in this movie. And it's directed by Ridley Scott, who arguably is one of the more well-known directors. He directed the original Alien movie from the 80s, which is a big deal. He directed Blade Runner, one of the top 80s movies of all time, and Gladiator, which is a really popular movie. So very well-known director, very talented. So this one is another one. It's a book adaptation, I should say. So it is adapted from a book. I haven't read the book yet, but I heard it was good. That's why they made it into a movie. But as far as overall entertainment factor, I think it's a very well done movie. It's got a pretty good cast, lots of different actors and actresses that are very talented, and I really enjoyed the whole movie.
Yeah, and as far as with me, I think it kind of suffered a little bit from what happened to Interstellar. It was kind of hyped to be a different kind of movie than what it ended up being. Not that that's wrong. I think both movies are fantastic, but not major blockbusters that changes the world like some of the previous movies by Ridley Scott. But
right.
I did enjoy it. I thought it was an interesting film. It had definitely a different take on being stranded in space, and I thought it was a lot more down to earth, so to speak, than a lot of sci-fi adventures.
Yeah, no, I definitely have to agree. And on both of those points, I think you guys actually had a really good point. Yesterday was actually my first time seeing the movie in its entirety. I'd only ever
Hmm.
seen clips of it. And so I got to watch the entire thing yesterday, which is really cool. And I enjoyed it quite a bit. I definitely would agree that, it was a good movie. It has some faults, it has some good things. It definitely takes a very interesting take on the whole, like combination of like sci-fi but more sci than fi, and also like
Right.
the whole like 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 you said, the survival aspect of it's very interesting, and it's a different take than he's not having to fight off monsters, he's trying to fight off biology basically.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think that's a good place to start. And for anyone who hasn't seen the movie, just a quick synopsis of it. Basically, it's the story, and we're gonna be talking. I guess I should probably put a spoiler warning in here somewhere because we're gonna be talking about at least a significant portion of the movie. It like we mentioned earlier, it stars Matt Damon, and he's a botanist. He is part of the team that goes to Mars, the Ares 3, and they are collecting samples of Martian soil, and they're running tests, and they're doing all this stuff when this massive storm hits that is about to basically capsize their ships, and they have to evacuate the ship, or they have to evacuate the planet. And Matt Damon's character, his name is Mark Watney, actually gets left behind because he got hit by a satellite that they believe killed him, and so they leave him behind, and he ends up surviving, and he has to learn how to survive on Mars for something like 500 days. I can't remember what the
Hmm.
number is now. But he has to survive for a while NASA tries to figure out how to get him back after they find out that he's still alive. And so you can imagine how, surviving on a deserted planet would be difficult to say in the least, if not impossible.
Hmm.
But he figures out how to do it by using some really, really smart planning with the use of science, and with technology and agriculture and all these things that are, some of them are a little bit further down the line in terms of what technology we have right now, but some of it's stuff that's very, very possible to do today. And that's what we're going to talk about as we get into this some more.
Okay. So
So,
I don't want to get ahead of myself here because I
mhm,
know I mean, the basis of the movie is he has to survive until they can figure out how to get him back home, right? I
right.
mean, that's really what the movie's about. He's stranded, and it's a stranded movie, but he's stranded in space, and he's
Mm.
stranded on Mars. We haven't been to Mars yet, right? So, how accurate do you think this movie is? I mean, considering what we know now.
Accuracy in terms of how he survives, or the fact that the situation happened at all?
Um, the fact that he survives, the way he goes about it.
I think that some of the stuff is a little bit far fetched.
Right.
I think that, because I did a decent amount of research on the science behind it after watching the movie, just because I was curious. But as far as the, you know, and we'll get into the agriculture stuff some more too. But as far as the growing the food, and the allocation of resources, I think a lot of that was, I mean, it might have been stretched a little bit, but it was fairly on par. The nutritional aspects might be a little, uh, you know, that might be that they might have had to do some Hollywood magic there to make us all assume that he could survive off of the diet of just potatoes for forever. Um, some of the technology I think is still to come. So I think with the current technology and the current practices and the current understanding of agriculture and science and technology, I don't think it's possible right now. No, maybe by the time we colonize Mars, we might have some better understanding of how some of that stuff might work, and we might be able to do it. But I think that the chances of him surviving were slim to none, if even possible.
Right, because I mean, that's a quote unquote fact that a lot of people believe is that you can survive strictly on potatoes as far as food goes.
Hmm.
Is that fact?
So as far as I've been able to tell, and I've done a significant amount of research on nutrition for other conversations I've had, but potatoes are one of the only foods that you can survive a long distance of time on, but you can't sustain yourself completely on them. That was actually, I don't know if you guys watched the YouTuber Film Theory. He's actually Game Theory, but he made a second channel.
Hmm.
I haven't.
Okay, so he's awesome. He does a lot of analyses and theories on different movies, and he actually does video games on his other channel as well. He actually just started a new one called Food Theory, which I'm very interested in checking out. Um, in his analysis of The Martian, he tells the story about this guy. I can't remember what his name is, but he basically is an advocate for the farming of potatoes, and this guy survived for like 90 days on just a potato diet because he wanted to prove that he could. And it was not ideal, to say in the least. Like, I mean, it kind of messed him up biologically, but he could do it because if you look at the nutritional content of potatoes, they have almost all of the nutrients that humans need to survive besides like 4. And those 4 are pretty important. And that's why he had some health complications because of it. But he ideally could have survived for a long period of time. The problem is not the nutritional content of the potato, it's the quantity of potato. He had to eat like a heavily significant amount, like almost like I'd say like 10 potatoes a day or something like that to keep him alive. Whereas, Matt Damon's character only gets to eat 1 a day.
Yeah.
So that's sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No. I was going to say that's something I do appreciate in the movie. Just as a real quick side note, is that they do make him thinner. It's
Right.
kind of a callback to Castaways, where he gets thinner, he gets weak, he can't work as hard, and they show that in the film. But yeah, I would definitely agree. I don't think the 1 potato a day would be impossible, or he definitely wouldn't be able to do as much work as he does. He would have to like basically sleep the entire time, wake up, eat a potato, go back to sleep.
Yeah, no, exactly. And that's I agree with you. I really appreciated the fact that they made him look thinner and weaker, and that he kind of, I mean, like he even starts to kind of lose some of his psychological stability over time, which part of that's isolation, but another part of it can be attributed to his diet because potatoes are actually lacking in a vitamin called B12, which is only present in animal proteins. And that vitamin, that B12, if you don't have a supplement for it, then you'll start to see, like they've done tests to see that people who are deficient in B12 are actually a lot more likely to have depression, anxiety, even start to kind of go crazy, because that vitamin is what kind of maintains our like the exchange of chemicals in our brain to keep us happy and sane, basically. So there is some accuracy in the fact that his behavior started to change a little bit, but the idea that he could sustain himself off of that 1 potato with no supplements, and which we don't know that he didn't have any supplements. He might have had some left over from the crew, but the chances of him having enough to sustain himself over that period of time were not entirely likely. We'll go with that.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, so I think that on that regard, as far as the possibility goes, there's a lot left up to the imagination. I personally don't think it's very possible with what we have, but who knows? By the time we actually touch Mars, we might be able to figure out a way to make it happen.
Yeah.
So, I think that one of the questions I wanted to ask you guys before we hop into the discussion some more is, what did you guys think of? So, I guess I'll kind of reverse the question on you. What did you think of his survival techniques in terms of like the technology, the energy, that his personal energy that he had to sustain, like the agricultural practices, how he used, the basically mulch or manure of him and his crewmates to sustain his farm. What do you guys think of all of that?
As I guess I'll hop into this, Brayden. I go first. I'm not kidding. No. I definitely wanted to do a little bit. I did a little bit of research on that. With the, we don't know the exact conditions of the Martian atmosphere at that time, and again, our experience is very limited. Like you said, maybe when we touch down, things will be different. But based off of what we know right now, he probably would have gotten very sick using, that manure, or from his crewmates and himself. Using it from himself, he would have been fine. But the different biological effects that cross contamination with other human feces in the soil would have definitely had negative effects. So the likelihood of that, I think, was quite the stretch. And also the Martian soil itself, we just don't know enough to know if it would have the.
All right, sorry about that. The weird break is because we had an internet issue, but we got it resolved now. So Logan, what were you saying?
Just about how between the atmosphere and the soil, having the correct nutrients, and obviously he changes the atmosphere for the plants, but in the soil, the toxic nature, or even just the high pH levels could definitely be a factor. And I'm sure you know a lot about that, but it's a lot of different factors throw in there. I think that's also a stretch. I think this movie lives on a lot of thin lines, and the diehard, scientists probably don't really appreciate it, but I think as far as from a scientific standpoint, it's interesting at the very least. It's interesting to take a look at.
Oh yeah,
Brayden?
no, absolutely. And I wasn't sure if you had anything to say that, Brayden. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I think that there's definitely a lot. I mean, like you said, even if not everything is perfectly what's what I'm looking for, realistic or valid scientifically, there's definitely a lot of interesting concepts there. Even and we could use it to base a lot of our understanding of how that might work. And so I did a decent amount of research on the quality of soil on Mars, and there's quite a bit of studying. I mean, I'm sure, as you guys can imagine, there's quite a bit of research done to see if we actually could farm on Mars, because they did find water over there about actually the same week this movie came out, ironically enough. But there was like basically the problem with Mars is because their atmosphere is so different than ours, and they have low gravity, and they don't have as much oxygen, and there's so many differences between our climates and theirs. It would require the crops we take over there to be evolved to their climate just to be able to grow properly, because their soil doesn't have nitrogen in it like our soil does, and our crops rely on that nitrogen to be able to grow properly. And so and not only that, the soil itself, the microbiomes within the soil, which is actually kind of a newer science that the farmers are exploring a little bit, is that there's an interconnected web inside the soil that's keeping that soil alive, that's keeping the crop alive, and that interconnected web relies on nitrogen and a few other nutrients to remain active, and Mars just doesn't have that. And the crops that we would bring over there just couldn't do that for the soil, and the soil couldn't do anything for the crop. So it's kind of, and there's, I'm trying to remember what it's called now. There's another thing in there. It's basically a salt, but it's toxic to humans, and I don't remember what it's called now. It's only toxic in high doses, so it might be okay. But if the food absorbs that and we eat a significant amount of the food, we will start to see some health effects that could be dangerous. So the long and short of it is that the soil of Mars is not sustainable enough to grow any food on until we're able to adapt the climate of Mars to be more similar to that of Earth, or until we could adapt the crops of Earth to be more similar to the climate of Mars.
Mm.
Yeah.
And go ahead, Brayden. Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you.
No, go ahead. I just was agreeing. I don't really have a point to make. A new point, I should say. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and actually, I had watched an interesting, I guess it's not really a show, it was more of a video about that specifically, about would it be possible to terraform Mars with what we know now. Obviously there's a lot more that goes into it than just going up and setting up a machine and pushing start, but such as just dealing with the radiation, dealing with, like you said, the toxic soil. But as far as with the atmosphere, it's pretty cut and dry, as far as just they really believe that there's a lot of carbon dioxide like beneath the soil that's trapped. So just releasing that kind of creating a greenhouse effect on the planet would start opening it up a lot more and creating more of a protective shield. But like you said, unless we could get to that point, it's not really going to be fathomable.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I kind of wanted to bounce an idea off you guys. So in my notes here, I was kind of looking over everything that I took notes of, and I actually went and did some research on what agriculture on Mars actually looks like right now. What they believe, what the current scientists believe would be kind of the best way to make farming happen if it could happen. And basically their idea is what's called microbial crops. So not only would they not be crops that we grow here, but they would almost be like more of like algae and like kind of like low growing plants that don't take up a whole lot of space, and they don't need a whole lot of sunlight, because Mars doesn't get as much sunlight as Earth does.
Right.
And I was curious what you guys think about, because they have the idea of microbial crops, which require a lot less of the like nitrogen inputs and a lot of those other chemicals that we don't have readily available on Mars. And they also have things like hydroponics that they've been working with for the International Space Center. And they have these practices of basically agriculture that is kind of like Earth's, but it's basically a whole new form of growing food. And like, what do you guys think about that kind of stuff?
Well, I mean, my question is: are they looking at it from the perspective of how could we be able to farm on Mars? Just from start from that point, or are
Mm.
they looking at how would we be able to farm from Mars and survive? Because my question is, how would we be able to survive off of that?
Right. And that was a question I had as well when I was doing the research. I was like, I don't want to eat algae for the rest of my life. Like, I'm not sure that's going to be sustainable. And so I think that I think that they're starting with the idea of can we even farm on Mars? And then eventually they're going to say, okay, we can farm on Mars. Can we farm in a way that will keep us alive on Mars?
Right, and they haven't even gotten to that point yet. It seems.
Not that I've seen from any of the research.
Yeah, we have a long ways to go to figure out. So, I mean, the movie's a lot really far fetched, of course, just because
Mhm.
there's a lot of unknowns, as already mentioned.
Right.
So they really kind of just make stuff up, but they try to make it as scientifically accurate as possible. It seems like,
Yeah.
and taking some liberties as well, of course.
Yeah. No,
But
I sorry.
no, go ahead.
I was gonna say I think that there's definitely a decent amount of just you just gotta believe this because it's a movie kind of thing. But I think that there are, because of how serious the scientists are right now about potentially colonizing Mars, there's definitely a lot of people that are looking into the idea of would it be possible to survive on Mars, and they're trying to figure out the best way that could be done. And obviously the movie is very it's kind of just like, I mean, not best case scenario, but probably only case scenario. Like if this were to happen, this is the only idea that we have that might possibly work, maybe. And in reality, if they try to do that, it probably wouldn't work. And well, I mean, it almost didn't work in the movie. Even like we saw his entire farm got blown up just because he wasn't perfectly careful with everything he did, and he was. It was just a matter of that's how things work. Um, so there's a lot, like you said, there's a lot of unknowns that they're still trying to explore with the idea of survival on Mars. I mean, food just being one of the biggest aspects of that, but there's a lot of different things that they haven't completely figured out yet.
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of movies in general is you can start to experiment with possibilities that are unknown at the moment,
Mm-hmm.
especially with science and the future, things like that, right?
Mm.
Predicting the future, but you know, it asks a lot of questions for you, and I appreciate that about any movie. Is that it asks questions for you? It brings up topics you may not have thought about, or questions you may not have thought about,
It becomes
and
inspirational, right?
right. So, it starts to ask the question of can we survive on Mars? Or can you survive on potatoes? Even simple questions like that. It asks for you so that, you can start to try and imagine it or picture it because movies do that for you. They put things, you know, on screen for you to visualize. Like with this movie's based off a book, right? So the book you can write down this is how he survives and write it out for everyone to read. But the task the movie has to take on is to put it on screen to make it look believable, right?
Mm.
And
Yeah.
so I think that's just a whole different ball game compared to writing a book. Is you actually have to make people, you have to visualize it for people. You have to put it uh, into a movie so that people watching can, at least the average person can try and believe that it's possible.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And it does one of the things I think is the most important part of it is it makes people ask, like you said, ask questions. And it may even inspire them to kind of do some of the research into what's possible and what's not, as far as, the development of technology and science and the ability to grow food in areas that we haven't been able to grow it before. And by asking those questions, people are, they're educating themselves on different parts of life and of technology and advancement that they just didn't know about before, and that could very well be a good thing.
Right.
The more people wonder about that kind of stuff, the more we have people that are going to put in the work to try to figure out how it could be possible.
Exactly. You just don't want to take what you see as face value. You don't want to believe what everything that you just watch, right? You want to look
Exactly.
into it, You want to look into it. Is that possible? Could that really happen? Things like that. You got to ask more questions, right? And you got to look into it for yourself. But at least the movie helps you get started off, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I really did appreciate the movie and Mark Watney as a character, just because, and maybe I'm grasping at straws a little bit here, but I personally think that he is like the perfect analogy for a farmer, especially a modern farmer. and I'll kind of explain what I mean by that. So one of the first things that he says whenever he figures out that he's going to have to survive there for however many days is, and I have the quote written down here because I wanted to get it right. He says, "I'm not going to die." That was it. He looked into the camera, said, "I'm not going to die," and then he went and became a farmer. Which that's kind of the whole thing. That's what started agriculture in the first place.
Right.
Everyone in society was kind of like, "We're not going to die," and then he started growing their own food.
Yeah, it's a lot of hands-on learning.
Yes,
you got to go out and do it, right?
Yep.
And trial and error, right? And I think
and
pushing yourself.
Right. Yes, exactly. And trying to figure out if you can find new ways to do things better and easier than you did them before.
Yeah.
And I think one of the things I appreciate, because the entire movie, if this is kind of true with anything, if you're looking for something hard enough, you're going to find it. But the entire movie, I think, can be treated as an analogy for kind of the early developments and just, even modern developments of agriculture, of science, and of just society. He talks about how he has he figures out, I get that he's a botanist, but he figures out how to not just make the plants healthy, but how to actually farm them in a way that's efficient. And he creates his own water source, and he does the whole tarp irrigation thing, which is really cool. Mm-hmm. And, a lot of that kind of stuff is stuff that we don't do on Earth, obviously, but farmers have figured out how to do stuff that's incredibly unique and amazing. We have drip irrigation, and we have, giant machines that keep the frost off of our trees. And we have, all these advancements in technology that is going into producing our food that people would probably not normally think of in their everyday lives. I think that's kind of a unique thing to see in movies and just in life in general.
Yeah. Have you ever seen Dirty Jobs?
I don't think I have.
Okay. Just because there's been a couple of times when he ends up, because farming is honestly can be a very dirty job, getting your hands dirty. And it was exactly that point that you just made about all those advancements and stuff. There's so much that people take for granted and that was definitely shown up in that movie. And something that I remember thinking, how do they do that? Apples, picking apples, you're not going to have, if people out there hand picking apples. That's just not, you can't pay people enough a lot of time, or even for grapes. It's not conductive for making a profit, for making a living even.
Right.
But yeah, I think he takes a lot of like you said, a lot of the modern take of a farmer, and he's a scientist, and it's a lot of fun, and it's really cool. I gotta agree with all those things.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I love the part where he's talking about how he's like, I grow all natural, organic, Martian grown potatoes. You don't hear that every day. That mentality, I think, is just really, really, it's cool to see, the idea of he's a frontiersman. He talks about how he's a space pirate because, Mars is up to its maritime law kind of thing. And, all these different, he talks about how, once you've grown crops somewhere, you colonize that land kind of thing. And all of these different things are kind of just, it's cool to see because, we don't get to see that kind of stuff anymore. We colonize pretty much everywhere on Earth that we can find. And we have this idea of Earth is, there's nothing left to do on Earth besides just try to find a way to get off of Earth, basically is kind of what the scientific consensus is right now. And so to see a new place, where nothing is there, and he's doing all these things that we did in the earliest forms of our society, I think it's kind of just, I think that's one of the big appeals of the movie to a lot of people, is this he's doing something that nobody's done before kind of thing, and that's pretty cool to watch.
And in my opinion, I think just in general, people that are into agriculture, farmers, in some ways, at times, because they're so productive and really at times ambitious, a lot of farmers end up becoming inventors in different ways. I'll give you an example. This is just off the top of my head. It's not the best example anyone could come up with, but if you watch Shark Tank, a lot of entrepreneurs that come onto Shark Tank are farmers. People that would be considered just normal everyday farmers, but they come up with some of the coolest things. One person came up with a wheelbarrow that had a tray for your drink and could hold your tools. So just, you see these different ways that people, you just watching the movie, you see that he's well, he's right. He's a botanist, right, originally, but he
Right.
becomes like an inventor. He comes up with just new things that you don't see anymore, and it's just fascinating, to see that even in real life, right?
Right. Yeah, and absolutely. And we, we talk about all the time how, we like, or that's the best way to put this. So farming and agriculture has a lot of newer technology, and like we use drones, we use robots, we use
Right.
wind machines, like we have
Hmm.
all this fancy technology. But people forget that a lot of, and even some of the newer technology, but a lot of the older technology that was used in agriculture was invented by the farmer. I mean, they invented their own tools, they invented their own,
Right.
like you said, the wheelbarrow, or they invented things that basically they were doing a job, and they said, man, it'd be really cool if I had something that would help me do this job better, and they just went and made it because they felt like it.
Hmm.
And or maybe because it was necessity for them to complete the job at a rate that they needed to keep their head above water financially.
Yeah. I mean,
So,
there's some of the hardest working people, and you'll
mhm.
see dads. They'll work night and day just to provide for their family, right?
Hmm.
um, and to keep their family comfortable, while also teaching their children how to survive on their own too. And I think that's
Right.
very admirable that you see that in a lot of those families. Um,
Yep.
my question to you, though,
Hmm.
and work with me here, okay? So I think this is one of the things that fascinates me about this movie in particular, okay? So I'm gonna go back to another movie, a couple other movies. You got 2001: Space Odyssey, right?
Hmm.
Movie made last century. Um, Basically, in some ways, predicting the future to the best of their ability at the time, right? And I think one of the things they predicted correctly was one of the many things was like FaceTime, which
Hmm.
was kind of an unheard idea at the time. You
Hmm.
look at the second Back to the Future that takes place in 2015,
I knew it.
and they predicted, they get a lot of things wrong, but you look at what they did get right, right? You look at what are the things that they predicted correctly. For example, they predicted Disney buying Star Wars. It's kind of weird, but it's like far-fetched, but these things are possible. So
Hmm.
my question to you is, do you think The Martian can be one of those movies that we'll look back on, and I'm sure it won't get everything right, right? I mean,
Hmm.
we already know some of the things they did wrong that are not possible. But will you think we'll look back and say, you know what, these guys are pretty smart, the ones making the movie and writing the book?
I think so personally, and I'll tell you why.
Hmm.
So in agriculture, it's a constant race of not being able to get enough resources for what you want. So particularly in California, we struggle with water, as you might have heard.
Hmm.
Um, we have a tendency to not get enough water, and it's not that we're not getting enough rain; it's that we don't have the infrastructure to support holding enough water in our area. And we see in the Martian, he creates his own water source by capturing different elements, and by using fire to extract the hydrogen and combine it with the oxygen, and he creates his own water. I think that things like that, things that give us the opportunity to take the chemical components of certain things and use them for other purposes. I don't see why we wouldn't create advancements like that, even within the next 10, 20, maybe 30 years. uh, I definitely don't know if everything that he uses is going to be at some point used in the future, but I highly believe at least some of his practices are, they might even be the inspiration for new technologies that people
Right.
produce to produce food, and maybe not even just food, but just technology to enhance life.
Right. Maybe like a different variety to what, the techniques that he used, right? Not
Right.
necessarily the exact replica, but just, kind of it branches from that idea
Yeah.
that came about from the movie. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, exactly. So I wanted to bring up a point, so I think it's kind of funny and in a not so funny way, but um, I think that since we were talking about how he kind of represents the ideal of the farmer, and as just the ideal of the person trying to advance in society and stuff like that. I found it really funny, which I know it wasn't supposed to be, but I found it really funny that he kind of learns the hardest lesson that there is to learn from agriculture, and that's that by being a farmer, you're basically playing, you're playing roulette,
Yeah.
because the biggest thing that farmers face on top of everything else, the regulations, and there's tons of issues that farmers face, but the biggest thing, and the thing that they can control the least, is the weather. Basically, every day a farmer risks his entire crop being destroyed. it could go from he's making $1 million one day to the next day he hasn't got a crop left in the field just because weather is only somewhat predictable, and it can, a tornado could come by and wipe out everything that he's ever owned, and now he's got nothing. It's just, which I guess that's true for a lot of different types of industries and for a lot of people's lives, but with agriculture in particular, you're relying on nature to keep you sustainable. And if nature decides it doesn't want to be sustainable, then you just lost everything that you've ever worked towards. And he learns that very quickly when his entire farm blows up.
Yeah. And I've actually seen that in real life. I don't know if you're familiar with the Hurricane Harvey. I hate to bring it up again because in our area, it's like kind of a meme. But anyways, especially in my area, there's a lot of cotton farmers, right? It's very big, very easy just because of our area to grow cotton. And these poor farmers on both sides of the road between where I live and San Antonio, they had just baled up all their cotton. They had just baled it up, ready to ship out. And as I was driving back, coming home after the hurricane, I saw bales and bales and bales sitting in water. Yeah. So I got to agree with you. I think he sees that, he gets that hit, and it's like that determination is so there. And I think the research done for the movie in that field as well was impeccable. I'm appreciating the movie more and more just talking with you guys about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just in general, not just with farming, but perseverance in general. You got to almost expect the unexpected, or expect something bad to happen, right? You, as much as you should be positive and should want to be positive, you almost want to have in the back of your mind that, sometimes things are going to go way south, and you have to have a plan. Like, what are you going to do to bounce back from that? I think that's just a life lesson in general. Yeah,
absolutely. And going back to a point I made earlier, I think he has the right mentality for it. And this is a mentality that not everyone who faces that kind of hardship has, but I think that those who have this mentality are much better off for it. And that's the mentality of, I'm not going to die, like his entire farm blows up and he's like, okay, I guess I'll just go get picked up by my friends. And he just figures out how to make the rest of his food ration just long enough to get him to where he needs to be. And, that mentality of we're not going to let this hold us back kind of thing is what kind of motivated a lot of, just kind of human development as a whole. All the buildings that we've built, all the machines that we've developed, all of the, the science that we've done. You got to imagine how many labs blew up, how many farms were destroyed, how many buildings were destroyed before, and how many people were just wanting to give up before they finally figured out that, we can't give up because society and humanity is depending on us. And that's kind of that. I think that, like, I hate to get deep, but I think that this movie reflects that kind of struggle really, really well, showing that despite all else, determination is one of the most powerful things that a human can possess.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, everyone's going to have to agree with you on that one.
Yeah.
You got to be determined. If you want to be happy and successful, you got to be determined to do, whether it's what you do good, what you're good at, or you got to be determined to get where you want to be,
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, I didn't mean to get all philosophical on you guys, but
I'm crying right now.
So, did you guys have any other questions as far as the the agricultural parts of the movie that you saw that you were kind of curious about?
So I'm not sure about this. I didn't do research on it, but at the beginning there was some kind of like storm, right? That caused him to be stranded. How accurate is that?
So from doing research, and I actually looked this up myself because I wasn't fully aware of this. The atmosphere in Mars is so weak compared to Earth's that storm wouldn't be possible, basically. That, the strongest winds on Mars are like a breeze. Like they don't even reach the levels that the Earth can have. Like they don't have tornadoes, they don't have massive dust storms. It's just not something that happens because their atmosphere is just not strong enough. And their gravity is like, I think 3 times weaker than Earth's or something like that. So, which also isn't represented super well in the movie, and I was kind of disappointed to see that because I wanted to see him floating around, but it's okay. But yeah, as far as I can tell from doing my research, that storm should not have happened.
Yeah.
Yep. And even if they did, it wouldn't have been, because I did a lot of research on this too, especially whenever I first saw the movie, because I had remembered just at the just before watching the movie, reading an article somewhere. I don't remember why it stuck in my brain that there's not a lot of wind, like you said already, on Mars. But even if there was a storm, that was that had started up, it would have lasted weeks, and again, wouldn't have been much more than a breeze, but it would have just been very dirty air, basically.
Yeah, no, exactly. And so if that would have happened, and maybe they all had a slight cough, I don't think it would have tipped over their entire ship, and definitely wouldn't have warranted him being stranded there. I don't think it would have pushed the satellite through his chest or anything like that. But it's all for the sake of making a good movie, I guess.
Yeah, well, I don't know. I would have liked to see him float around, but maybe they tried it and they're like, "This is not very fun. Or it's not entertaining enough."
I think that would have been cool to see him trying to farm, but everything's floating.
Maybe that's what would have made it impossible.
I mean, that's what they're trying to do with hydroponics in the International Space Center. I'm not sure how great things are going for them. I know they have agriculture in the Space Center. I'm just not sure how it works exactly.
Yeah.
And just kind of off the top of my head, what I would think is there's got to be, some sort of barrier, some sort of way to keep everything compressed and together.
Right.
Obviously, and to keep the moisture in, but also to provide warmth and light for them to photosynthesize.
Yeah, I can imagine there's some kind of chamber that they use to house the crops that they're trying to grow with hydroponics. I mean, they at least had the luxury of not having to worry about soil in that instance, but they still have to do the nutritional supplements to the plants and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Actually, it just reminds me. I saw there's a YouTube channel where they interview different people, experts, and ask them about the accuracies of different movies. And they interviewed an astronaut on different movies like The Martian and Interstellar, and there were some others that I forget the one with Chris Pratt and Jennifer Lawrence where they wake up. No, the one where they wake up too early and everyone's still asleep. They're on their way to the second.
Oh, yeah.
I forget what it's called.
I forget what that one's too. Whenever you forget, it makes me forget, Brayden.
I thought that was Interstellar. I guess it's not. I always get those movies confused.
Yeah, I forget. The name just escapes me.
I'll look it up. I have my phone. We have technology.
That's true.
It reminds me of the Patrick meme on SpongeBob. We have technology.
You're a man of culture.
It just doesn't come from California. Doesn't mean I don't have a sense of humor.
Passengers. That's what it's called.
Passengers. Yes, that movie.
Yeah. So apparently there was a lot of accuracy. There's always going to be things that are not right, but a lot of these movies lately have been fairly scientifically accurate because I think that's what people want to see nowadays.
Oh yeah,
we're getting so advanced technologically that people are becoming more and more aware of what's accurate and what's not. Hopefully, I hope I'm not just saying that.
That's always kind of the like you said, the hope that people are starting to catch on that okay, that can't happen, and okay, that's fairly plausible. Although some people are somewhat unaware of the technology that we have available on Earth right now. I was having conversations with some people I had on the podcast before that didn't realize that we use robots in agriculture, that we use artificial intelligence, or that we use a lot of that kind of stuff, and the drones that we use in farming are more advanced than any drone that's on the consumer market right now. And when I bring that kind of stuff up, they're like, I thought that farmers just put some seeds in the ground and waited for them to grow. Wow. I was like, yeah, that's the problem.
I mean, people feel that way with just about people that are just uneducated about certain things, and they tend to lean on stereotypes.
Right.
Even with like firefighters, I went to the fire academy, and there's a lot of people that are like, I thought firefighters just put fire out with their hoses and that's it. There's a lot more that they do. There's a lot more that everyone does, and everyone's becoming more technologically advanced. You kind of have to. You got to keep up because it makes things easier.
Yeah, no, exactly. And I've come across that as well. Just learning that people don't first of all, they don't do research, and second of all, they have very simplistic understandings of the world around them until they are taught, or until they go and educate themselves about what's actually going on out there.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that don't know how to do research. I was kind of surprised. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that's a problem in society as a whole. Like a lot of people get upset about just about anything
Yeah.
without any research whatsoever.
Right.
But not to get political or anything. I don't want to do that. But just in general.
Well,
Um,
just it's not necessarily political when it's fact. You know what I mean? Like, there's just a
true.
lot of people. There's so I think the United States has the most skeptics when it comes to COVID, and we're supposed to be the most advanced, country, right? But
Right.
there's so many people that are ignorant, I guess is the
Mhm.
word. I don't want to be too mean, but they're just not educated.
Right.
And we see it every day. My wife's a nurse, and she comes home mad every day about all the people that are just totally unaware of anything that has to do with medically. They don't understand how to stay healthy. They don't understand how to prevent the spread of germs. They don't understand side effects, and that pneumonia, for example, can be caused because of COVID. They
Right.
think pneumonia is a completely separate thing, so there's no way they could go hand in hand. There's just people that don't know how to connect the dots to certain things.
Well, that always cracked me up whenever everything first started and they started posting the commercials on TV and like even like Target started having like announcements over their loudspeaker and stuff like that, and they were saying like, "Don't forget to wash your hands." I was like, people
Mhm.
weren't washing their hands before.
Oh
What's
yeah, no, you'd be surprised. You'd be
yeah,
surprised.
yeah.
That's really
I was
upsetting.
Yeah, I was about to say, yeah, it would be. It's unfortunate with how many people. Like I remember, I don't remember exactly what happened, but there was a story where a lady in New York, um, she fell out of a building. Um,
Oh,
I don't remember exactly what happened, but it was, and she was okay. She survived. But they were like, what happened? And it was, again, I don't remember exactly what happened, but it was one of the stupidest things where it was, there was, it had to be a scenario where she like didn't push the bar or something. There was a bar that protected it and she pushed it and she fell out of a building. And it was just something that, you would connect the dots and say, well, don't do that. um, don't lean over the edge and you won't tip over. It's something that my grandma always says is that common sense is becoming less and less common. But um,
hmm
I'm glad in movies at least that the opposite is true. That
right.
we're getting lasers that can in fact cut through, metal, and we're getting uh, glass like in in Star Trek. I don't know if you've heard of Alon. It's
Mhm.
it's transparent aluminum, very difficult to
Oh,
produce, but things are accelerating still, and it's good to see.
yeah, absolutely. And kind of going back to our point before about doing research and that sort of thing, I advocate, all the time on this show and pretty much every other show I go on, whenever somebody asks me a question or whenever I'm asked to speak on behalf of a certain issue or a certain topic, especially around agriculture, but just in general, I always make sure that I specify the idea that I'm no expert. I don't know everything there is to know about these topics. That's why, I do a significant amount of research, but anything I say, make sure you go fact check it. Like, anyone listening to this, don't just take my word for it. Like, whenever I do research, if I find something that I think might be true, if I can't find two or three or four other articles that say the exact same thing, then I just don't believe it because it's probably not, there's nothing backing it. If you can find, four or five articles that say the exact same thing, then okay, you can see that there's some ground to it.
Right, there's some consistency there. Yeah, just don't
Mm.
assume that The Martian is a real movie just because we're talking about it.
Matt Damon did not go to Mars, I
Yeah,
promise.
don't assume Matt Damon is a real person either.
Everyone knows Hollywood's not a real place.
Yeah,
Yeah.
all aliens like Men in Black.
Yeah,
Oh.
SpaceX is a conspiracy theory.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Speaking of conspiracy theories,
What you got?
do you believe in any? What do you think about theories just as a whole?
So I grew up, reading all kinds of stuff about, monsters and ghosts and conspiracy. Like that's how I grew up. So I believe is a strong word. I really like conspiracy theories. I like to hear the ideas behind them, and I
Right.
think that I think that some have some very good foundation and some good backing to them. Um, I'm trying to think. I mean, off the top of my head, there's none that I could think of that I like firmly believe is the case. I mean, if you're talking about like aliens and ghosts, then that's a different story. But if you're talking
Right.
about like the Illuminati and that sort of thing, I believe that there are certain aspects that sound more believable than others, and so it's kind of just like it's hard to say I believe in a conspiracy theory when some of it I'm like, okay, that could be possible, but the entire thing I'm just like, there's some holes there that I'm not
Right,
sure how
yeah.
they fit
No,
together.
that's what I meant. Is more like people that believe that 9/11 was an inside job kind of conspiracy
Right.
theories,
I mean,
things like that.
yeah, I can't think of any that really stand out to me that I'm like, oh yeah, that's definitely true. There's some that I have heard that I'm like, I could believe that. Like, it's not that it's not that that's what I live by, but I could at least like if it came out to be true, I would not be surprised, kind of thing.
So I have a question then.
Okay.
Do you believe in ARP?
ARP.
Yeah, the weather machine controlled, but not AARP, but the I think it's ARP. Um, uh, it might be HARP, but anyways, the weather machine. The weather machine that supposedly is in Alaska, I think, and it's been a while since I've looked into this conspiracy theory. But basically, the world's governments control the weather. Have you heard that one?
Okay, so I have heard that theory. I didn't know that's what it was called, but I have heard that theory. That's a tough one. I think that there are parts of it that I could understand just because of how how drastically our weather changes, and how quickly it changes. But it's difficult for me to say that because if you look at the trends of how weather changes over time, there's consistency there too. So if they are changing it, they're being very careful about how they change it. And so I don't know. That's a tough one. I have to do more research on it to really get a good standing.
Yeah. Yeah, I always thought it was interesting because I had actually seen it in a video on the wildfires out in California, and so it just came up, and you end up going down the rabbit hole whenever you get into those things. But I just thought it was interesting. I don't for one believe it because, like you said yourself, there's some stuff that is believable. I think we do have a major impact on our environment.
Right.
But I don't think there's someone with the keys to the treasure, so to speak, who could do whatever they want whenever they want.
Right.
Yeah, there's so many. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're good. Go ahead.
So, yeah, to me, it's like I get it, but a lot of conspiracy theories, there's parts, not everyone, but there's always some big, like for example, Logan's point here about the weather controlling. There's got to be someone that would come across something that obvious. I feel. You know what I mean? Like some things just you can't always hide. I mean, crazier things have happened, but I just think some things are too obvious where it's only a conspiracy theory. If it were a fact, you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, exactly. And I think that when it comes to conspiracy theories, I really like the ones that are more like there are some that are a little bit too realistic to not be true. Like,
right.
And when I say that, I mean it's one of those things. It's like, it's like I said earlier. You could believe it to be true even if it's not. But if it came out to be true, you'd be like, oh yeah, I could have called that. But there's some that I really, really like. They're almost kind of like a stupid theory, but they're really fun and it's cool to believe that they can be true. Like the Mandela effect, for example. Mm-hmm. I'm assuming you guys know what the Mandela effect is.
We need to do actually an episode on that, Brayden.
Yeah,
I have heard about it. Yes,
when everyone starts becoming black, you just starts to affect everyone. Is that what you mean?
So yeah, the Mandela effect. Very, very briefly, because this is we're getting a little off topic, but it's okay. It's perfectly on par. We'll swing it back to Ag in here in just a second. But the Mandela effect basically says that there's a couple different theories on how it happens. Either a time traveler went back in time and changed the timeline, and now they're kind of like we're seeing changes happen in real time, or we're crossing over with a multiverse with another universe from the multiverse, and our two universes are clashing and it's causing changes. So basically, we're seeing things that like the massive majority of people remember them being one way, but they're actually another.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, I know what it is.
So I think it's a really fun and kind of cool theory. I'm not sure what grounds there is to it. I think that there's things that really catch me off guard when I hear that they're Mandela effects, and I'm like, oh, I could have believed that. But a lot of them can be kind of written off as like, okay, people just remembered it wrong.
Yeah. And as a side note, real quick, sorry to I guess I'll be willing it back, but it was actually HARP, and that was actually what it's called a high frequency active auroral research program, and it's based out of Alaska. So I was correct about that, but it's to study the ionosphere.
Interesting. And there's theories that it's actually changing the weather.
Correct. So it might be helping out the farmers in California, trying to. I don't know.
Or starting the fires.
The farmers to get rid of our droughts.
Yeah.
They just give us nonstop rain. That's how you help out the farmers. But
maybe that's too obvious for them.
Yeah, it could be. But well, actually, I do know conspiracy theory around farming.
Well, that old McDonald was a real person.
Wait, what was it?
That old McDonald was a real person.
I believe that if somebody told me that, but no. There are conspiracies that at least in California, that the state government is trying to convert all farmland back into desert and swamp like it was before the settlers got here.
I've heard that one. Yeah.
Okay. And that that's a conspiracy theory that I actually can believe just because of the amount of regulation, and the governor himself is not in full support of agriculture. Like, that's one of those ones that's like, if it came out to be true, I could believe it, but I don't live my life off of the idea that the government's out to get me kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, it's hard to believe people that will live and die by believing that conspiracy theories are 100% fact. You know what I mean? When instead of believing that they are what they are, conspiracy theories, they're just theories.
Exactly. So I think that a lot of farmers are fearful of that, but they don't live their lives out of oh yeah, we're going to get taken out by the government kind of thing. But we have seen things that have kind of led to that being true. Like the governor is trying to create a high-speed rail in California that would wipe out a decent amount of the farms in the Central Valley, and so stuff like that kind of makes us wonder, okay, well, what's your real motivation here? Are you trying to actually increase the efficiency of transportation, or are you trying to get rid of the farms? Because you don't have to go to the farms to make your transportation work.
Yeah.
So anyways, yeah, I mean, as far as agriculture goes, since we kind of veered off that track a little bit, did you guys have any other questions about agriculture? I mean, both in the movie and just outside of it in general.
Not from me. Brayden?
No. I have a funny story.
Okay, go ahead.
So, my mom is a city person. She was born and raised in Minneapolis, and she's African American, so they like to eat fried chicken. I'm not trying to be racist here. I'm black too, so
yeah,
that's kind of just that's one of the foods that they enjoy. And my grandma makes it. She makes really good fried chicken. Anyway, so first time she ever saw a chicken was as an adult. She was dating my stepdad at the time, and she asked why she said, "Oh, that poor chicken only has 2 legs." And the reason why everyone started laughing at her is because the reason she thought that chickens had 4 legs is because that's how they came in the certain combo. They come with 4 legs, so she thought the chicken had 4 legs.
That's awesome,
man. I gotta say, that's not the most ridiculous ag fact I've heard.
Really?
Oh yeah. Okay. So if we're going into this is a fun story time. So just for the record, I'm assuming you guys know the difference between a cow and a bull.
Yes.
Yeah, one's male, one's female.
Thank you. So
I'm sorry, I just hang out with Brayden too much.
You know what though? I will say, I think I didn't learn until I was maybe like a preteen or teenager that the bull was the male and the cow is the female.
That's fair though. I can give you that. I mean, I would expect that to be common knowledge, but I can definitely understand why people don't learn until they're older, just because if they're not exposed to it as much, it's not quite as easy to understand. I've heard some very interesting responses to that question. So I'm studying agriculture in college. I'm 20 years old. I'm a third year in college. I'm studying to be an ag teacher, and I have been part of what we call the ag ambassador program, which means that I go around and help teach other people about agriculture, and that's kind of what I'm trying to do independently with the podcast here. But I was at a career show thing, and I was representing my school, and I was, people would walk by and I'd ask them random questions about ag, and if they got it right, I would give them something, to reward them. If they got it wrong, then I would correct them.
Like a
And
mini
it could be
cow.
about anything: animal science, plant science, ag business, mechanics, all that kind of stuff. So the entire day, every time somebody walked by and because they like spin a wheel, if they spun the wheel and landed on animal science, I would ask them, what's the difference between a cow and a bull? And a couple people got it right. A few people said, the bull's male and the cow's female. And I was like, okay, good. A lot of people got it wrong, though. And when I say people, I mean like full-grown adults in their 40s and 50s, they would say, bulls have horns and cows don't, for example.
Well, I mean...
Go ahead.
No, go ahead, sorry.
Which is understandable because that's how they're portrayed in media. You see like cartoons of a bull, he has big old horns and he's big.
Well, that's what I was going to say, is that's how the media portrays it. So
right, and that's understandable. But I respectfully explain to them, cows are capable of growing horns as well, because horns is a genetic thing. It's not a sex thing. And then I've had some people explain to me that cows produce milk and bulls produce meat, which isn't entirely wrong, but milk.
Okay. No meat on the bones whatsoever on those cows.
You mean they produce meat from the udders? That's what they meant.
No. The cows produce the milk and the bulls produce the meat.
Yeah, no, I'm just joking.
but that's, I mean, the fallacy there is that yes, bulls produce meat, but cows can also be used for meat.
Well, exactly, yeah. So yeah, would you give them a prize because you're like, technically you're not wrong?
I did, yeah. I would give them a prize, and I would just correct them and say, you're not wrong, but cows can also be used for meat. Like your average McDonald's burger comes from a milk cow instead of a bull. And so I had one guy, and I'll never forget him. He's a very interesting fellow. He came by, spun the wheel, landed on animal science. He had to be like in his 50s or 60s. He's kind of an older guy. And I think he had a few screws loose because I'm not sure. He just acted kind of weird. I don't know. I asked him what the difference between a cow and a bull was. You want to know what he said?
What?
Bulls eat meat and cows don't. Not even joking. I kind of looked at him for a second. I was like,
well, he's 50% right.
I didn't even know how to respond to that. I was just like, how do you
come with that?
So I corrected him and said, no, bulls don't eat meat. Cows don't eat meat either, but bulls definitely do not eat meat. And he was like, oh. I was like, bulls used for meat? Is that what you meant? And he was like, I guess. And I was like, okay.
He's all disappointed.
And I just gave him a pencil and made him go away.
That's pretty funny.
But I've gotten a lot of weird questions like that. Like, a lot of people believe that chocolate milk comes from brown cows, for example. Or
I thought that was a joke.
No, that's an actual... I've met people that actually thought that.
Well, those are people that didn't grow up putting chocolate syrup in the milk.
Right, exactly. Or that didn't grow up, milking cows too.
Yeah.
But or I've had people, say, I actually haven't heard somebody say this, but I know people who have heard people say this, that cotton comes from animals because they think it's horrible.
Well, because cotton candy comes from sheep, pink sheep.
Minecraft is messing with your head again, Brayden.
No,
you've been playing too much Minecraft.
No, I'm joking. That was actually in Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. You remember that?
Oh yeah.
That's why I brought that up.
See, movies are ruining people's perspectives on.
In some ways, yeah.
We should start a petition.
Or the one, remember they were whipping the cow to make whipped meat?
Oh man, but yeah. So I've had some very interesting stories come from people not knowing where their food comes from.
Yeah,
and that's why I'm here to try to fix that.
Good. You're doing a good thing.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
I think that's really good. A lot of people need that education.
So I've learned.
Unfortunately, yes.
No, but I think I speak for Logan maybe that we admire what you do with your podcast. I think you're doing a good thing. You're teaching people about something, especially people that are interested in it, but maybe didn't grow up around that environment. I think the podcast is a very good way to reach people.
Yeah. Well, I definitely appreciate. Sorry, Logan, I didn't mean to cut you off there. Just something you want to add to that?
No. Yeah, I just real quick. I have a family friend that he like I was there when his daughter was born. He's like in between my age and my dad's age. Um, he always calls himself my dad's little brother. But you know, he was a city guy, came from San Antonio, kind of like Brayden. But now he lives out on a farm, and stuff like your podcast can really have people's opinions change as from farming being ew gross, I got to deal with stinky animals, to wow, there's a lot of science, a lot of effort, a lot of really interesting stuff that gets into this, and it could be really enjoyable. I think it's one of the most enjoyable forms of work that you could do is working with animals and working with the soil. It's something that feels natural, feels real, feels good, and then you're with science as well, and it's just combining all the coolest things together. So I agree with Brayden. I appreciate what you do.
Awesome. Well, I greatly appreciate the compliments, and I've learned over time that a lot more people are curious about and want to learn about where their food comes from and all the science and all the technology and all the kind of stuff that's incorporated with growing it. They just don't really know where to get the information, and so I'm trying to be that source. At least maybe I try to give them the information, but I also try to lead them to where they can find it. That way they can go and share it around and tell their friends and their family about, oh, I just learned about, they actually use robots to pick our fruit and stuff like that. And it's just, stuff like that's really, really cool to me to see. But no, I definitely agree that it's something that is, I mean, obviously I believe it's something that's kind of lost upon, the newer generations of society, that they just aren't connected to the farm quite as much. And I never advocate for the idea that people need to be, all country. They need to, support a country lifestyle or anything like that. I think that however people live is perfectly fine, as long as they understand that, a lot of work goes into producing their food, and the way they vote, the way they purchase, the decisions they make when purchasing, what labels they decide to trust, and, who they decide to support, all those things impact how their food is grown. And the sooner they understand that, the easier it is for that food to be grown effectively, and it makes it a lot less stressful for that farmer to do his job well. So, yeah, but I like I said, I appreciate you making the time to do this. I apologize for the technical difficulties.
No, you're good.
We got it all resolved.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad we were able to do this. I know that when we first started talking, it was kind of a struggle to figure out what would be a good movie to base this off of. And I wanted to do a movie just because I'm kind of taking a new approach to this of, having these conversations in a context that's outside of just agriculture and country, and, providing things that people could listen to and lash to and relate to. And so I thought that the movie thing would be kind of a cool idea to try out.
Yeah, I think it's worked out well.
Yeah. So I think that's all I have for you guys. I don't know if you have anything else you want to add. If you want to plug, your podcast or any media or anything like that, again, you're more than welcome to.
I'll leave that up to you, Brayden. You could go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think we talked about it a little bit more, but I guess I can just quickly repeat myself. Me and Logan host a podcast called Absolutely Gobsmacked. We go over behind the scenes stories, maybe things that you didn't know about some of your favorite movies. We take a light approach to it, so we try to add a little bit of comedy while giving you some facts, educating you on how things kind of go behind the scenes, some stories you didn't realize, okay? And so once in a while, we also do true crime, which can be a little more somber, a little sad, but for the most part, I think it's a good break from reality. There's a lot going on in the world right now, with COVID, and there's a lot of political movements, and it's a podcast where everyone can listen, no matter what your opinion or walk of life is. I know you'll appreciate it. So
awesome. Well, yep. I'll be linking it down in the description, so you guys can go check it out. I heavily recommend it. I listen to it all the time while I'm at work. It kind of gives my brain something to do while I'm just in autopilot. So yeah, I think it's a great thing you guys are doing. It's a lot of fun. I really, really enjoy it. I think a lot of other people should as well. But yeah, that's all I have. So thank you guys once again for joining me. Thanks everyone so much for tuning in. And don't forget, if you ate today, thank a farmer.